Moshi Moshi.
Hello,
I'm Zeb Ramsbotham,
and I'm Annie Ramsbotham.
and we're the Rambling Ramsbothams.
Our journey might be rambling, but we hope this podcast isn't.
So what are we talking about today?
We're talking about how brave I was this week.
Oh, was I not brave?
No, because we went to the dentist for the first time in Japan.
And it doesn't count for me.
No, because all you had to do was get your teeth cleaned, so you get like a silver star for bravery. But I had to get my cavity filling like recapped. It was terrifying.
Yeah, some of us just don't need that.
Just have perfect mouths.
Got no problems here.
But that's what we're going to start talking about this week is the dentist. We're also going to talk about Godzilla, the new Godzilla movie. I guess it's not that new, but if you're listening from America...
It's relatively new in America.
Got released in America.
Yeah.
And then we're also going to talk about some high school cycling that we got to participate in with Zeb's high schoolers. And finally, a little Kit Kat update. You want to talk about the dentist first?
Sure. So, Annie has been wanting to go to the dentist.
You say that like I've been excited about it. I just feel like we should have, preventative maintenance, some some annual checkups. And we've been here for almost a year and a half at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Never been to the dentist before. You're supposed to go like once a year at least.
Well, in America, we went. So it had probably been about a year and a half since we went. Because I think we went like right before... I think I went the summer before we moved to Japan. So yeah, it's not like we haven't been in years.
No, but it had been enough time.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to get everything checked out and cleaned, And so with the help of my coffee club friends, they called a local dentist. It was really convenient because I don't know if this is a Japan thing, but just per capita dentists seem to be way more around here. Like
almost everything in terms of like almost everything in terms of like appearance maintenance. There's so many hairstylists, there's so many makeup places, there's so many dentists.
But the dentist is so much more than appearance.
No, I mean it is more than appearance, but I'm just thinking about like those things. There are an odd number of those things in Japan.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's like very dense.
Well, in just Uchinada, there's a ton of dentists to choose from, not even to mention Kanazawa. So luckily, the dentist that we went to was like a 3-minute bike ride from our house. We could have walked there, which was great.
Yeah, it was super close.
And then we didn't have any like pain or issues, but I did just have general nerves about the dentist because it's a new country. I mean, we've been here for a little while, but new to me, a new experience. And I didn't really know what to expect. Like I had heard rumors about stuff like they don't use anesthesia, for example, which I think is just a rumor. I did get offered anesthesia.
I don't know if it's just a rumor. I just think certain dentists and certain doctors are more old school. Mm-hmm. You hear that a lot in Japan that because, I don't know how true this is, but people say that doctors in Japan don't have to do like continuing education. So it's like once they become a doctor, they're a doctor and they don't need to learn anything new.
Is that true? They don't have to...
That's what I've read. So as science has changed, there are a lot of old doctors in Japan that are just kind of, well, this is the way I learned it and this is the way I'm going to do it. But we did have a friend, and I think we talked about before, that she went to the dentist and she's from South Africa. And they told her that, you foreigners have those strong bones. Yeah. So it's just very different when you come here. And she was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, so she was told she didn't need as much anesthesia because her bones were stronger. Yeah,
it was something weird. So we have heard like personal anecdotes from people we know in real life that have told us these kind of kooky stories.
So yeah, going in, I was like, okay, it's fine. We're just going to get affirmation that everything's good. We're going to get our teeth cleaned and like reset for the next year, There's no need to be worried. So we biked over there. You had to take, a little more than an hour off work. And then the actual dentist was very similar to my experience in the U.S. One, I guess, like difference is you take your shoes off when you go in and they give you slippers, but that's very common in general in Japan. But it was in
But there's another really big difference inside.
I don't know.
We were all just in one big room. And the dentist back in America, you would always go in like a separate, almost like when you go to the doctor and you go see the nurse, you're in a room. Like you would go into a room and then it's just you in a chair with your like dentist.
Oh.
And then here, we were just all in an open room.
That's true. I forgot, because I used to go, I mean, of course, I would go to a pediatric dentist as a kid, but in the pediatric dentist office, we were all in one room, I feel like. But
yeah, I think I had braces when I was a kid, and I think when I was dealing with that, I think we were all in the same room.
But you're right, when we went to the dentist here, we were just all in this room separated by, like, curtains.
Well,
so
it was like a little plastic sheet, or like it was like
a shower
solid.
curtain.
No.
Oh.
Remember, there was like just a plastic divider. It wasn't like a curtain.
Well, after she told me that I needed my filling recapped, I didn't really pay attention to anything else. I was trying to do calming breaths.
Well, you were about to say, and I think this is another really interesting thing, and we've briefly mentioned this, that I don't know the zoning laws in Japan, but they're very different. Like, you can have businesses and restaurants and even like factories mixed in with housing.
Yeah.
And so when you go to this dentist, you're still in a neighborhood, but then it looks like a house, but it's a dentist office.
Yeah.
And I think it was connected to a house.
Yeah, I think someone lived, like, in the next wall over.
Yeah.
But it was professional. I mean, inside was super clean and had modern, not appliances, but, like, what do you call, like, the machinery that dentists use?
Modern dentist tools.
Yeah, it felt very clinical, I
Yeah.
guess, in a professional way. But from the outside, it just looked like someone's home. And I was like, oh, what?
Also, I don't know if you noticed, but when it was like a really windy day, and so on my side, you could definitely tell the building was like kind of like shaking with the wind.
Really?
So I was kind of like...
This is sounding like it was not a professional operation, but
No,
I felt
it was
very
nice.
comfortable about the whole business itself, but just in general, some anxiety about dentists no matter the country. But the other interesting thing is they didn't take any x-rays, and I don't know that was usual or unusual for Japan in general, but they just stuck this metal mirror thing in our mouth and took a ton of photos.
Yeah, and I guess it's pretty interesting. I guess I should have assumed this was happening, that like we were going to a new dentist and they don't know us, and so they need to do a lot of like checks to make sure the general health of our mouth. But in my head, I was kind of thinking like, yeah, all we need is a cleaning. We'll tell the dentist we need a cleaning.
Oh,
we'll
I knew
go
that they
in,
were going to ask
and they'll
us all
clean our
these.
teeth.
I
But
knew
then
they would ask us the questions about, like, history.
I knew that, but then they did the full, like, welcome to the clinic. They're like, we're going to do all these checks. We're going to take all these pictures of your mouth.
Oh, I wanted them to do that. I want them to find something that I didn't know was wrong, like my filling cap being cracked.
I just wanted my teeth cleaned.
Oh, you didn't even want to go.
Well, that's all I needed.
Yeah.
Just my teeth to be cleaned. I don't need anything else.
Once they showed us the photos, which was nice, they took all the photos and then they put them on this display board that's right next to you, like a TV screen, so you can see them with the doctor, which I liked. And they were like, yeah, so here's your filling. And it did look messed up. It had like a crack in it. So they were like, she was explaining this in Japanese and I was trying really hard to follow, but I picked up like, it's best to remove it and replace it. And I was like, okay. And she was like, it's gonna hurt a little. And I was like, okay. And she's like, do you understand? And I was like, oh, I understand.
Wow.
I'm gonna have to get my filling replaced. But it was okay. I asked her, do people usually, because she did offer, she said, if you want to, I can use anesthesia. And I was like, do people usually use anesthesia? Like, how much is this gonna hurt? And she was like, I don't know. And she kind of was like, we could just start, and if it's too much, I can give you anesthesia. And I was like, okay, that sounds fine. And so we did that. They also give you this little cup of mouthwash to, like, swish and spit.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
I mean, I guess it's not that interesting, but I just remember she gave it to me, and I was like, oh, okay, a spit cup. And I'll spit in this, like, basin right next to me. And, like, as I was spitting in the basin, I was like, I had a minute of, am I supposed to spit here? Did I just, like, spit all over the equipment,
Yeah, I was also trying to figure out. I was pretty sure that's what it was for. Also because it had, like, a little water thing that, like, rinsed it. But yeah, I was kind of thinking, like, is this...
I was like, what if this is the cleaning sink and I just, like, spit all over it?
Yeah, but then I was thinking, no one's going to put their hands in that. It was so tiny.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because you sat down and they gave you some mouthwash. And then after you rinsed your mouth, when you put the cup on the little cup holder, they, like, refilled it with water.
Yeah.
And then every so often, the dentist would tell me, like, oh, you should, like, rinse your mouth or you should drink some water.
Which was nice because it didn't keep my mouth as dry. They also didn't have the sucky tool. You know, the one that like just constantly sucks your spit out?
Oh, I had that.
I had it, but it wasn't, and I don't know, in my American dentist, they would just like hang it on your mouth, and it would
That's
just
what
like...
my dentist did.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Mine didn't do that.
My lady, she just hung it.
Oh.
It was really nice. I like that thing.
Maybe you had extra spit, because they didn't give me one, and I was kind of like, ah.
Yeah, you're really dry.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. I like it because I guess my mouth produces a lot of saliva. I don't know.
Ew.
But, like, I hate that feeling of having to swallow.
Yeah, I do too.
And so it's nice when they give you the little spit sucker, because then you don't have to swallow. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, so they cleaned our teeth. It was pretty normal. They did do this gum check where they put it...
That part was the only part where I got like a little bit nervous, because she showed me the chart.
The chart?
Well, she showed me a picture of like what they were about to do, because they asked us at the beginning when we first sat down. They're like, "Oh, and do you want the gum disease check?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure. Like that sounds...
Tell me if I've got disease.
Sounds appropriate." And then they were trying to explain it, and she couldn't really explain it, so she pulled out like a chart and just showed me a photo. And so she was like, "Oh, here's what it is." But the picture was like a close-up of basically like a little ice pick, like a toothpick or something, and like it going into someone's gum, and then it looked like it was just like wrenching it around. And then also in the picture there was like a little blood droplet. So I was like, what? Like,
yeah, what? Like, we're about
I was like, what are you about to do?
Here.
And then she was like, yeah, and it's gonna hurt a little bit. And I was like looking at the picture and then hearing her say it's gonna hurt, and I was like, I mean, I'm locked in now, but this looks terrible. And then it was totally fine.
It was totally fine. That one I think was more...
I couldn't even feel it.
Me neither.
When she was like poking around in my gums.
It was like flossing almost, like aggressive flossing.
Kind of, but essentially they were checking... In America, I've never had this. So if you've had this and you're listening to me talk about this, sorry. But it's, if you are like me and you've never seen this before...
It's like a gum depth test.
Yeah, the pick has different lines on it to measure like millimeters, and they're measuring how deep, I guess, it goes in your gums, and I think it could go up to 6 millimeters, and I'm honestly not sure if shallow or deep was better or worse.
Maybe shallow is worse because your gums are inflamed and you can't go as far.
Like receding or something?
Oh, yeah, maybe. Anyway.
But they said my gums were fine,
yeah.
I was like, okay.
Gums are good, and then, so when they took out the little drill to start doing my tooth thing, I was like, oh God. And you were only like 2 beds away from me, but there was somebody in between us. So she was like, do you want to get this refilled? And in my head, I was like, I only brought like $100 to this because I thought it was a cleaning. So I was like, how much is it going to cost? You know, because it seems like not a big operation, but they're going to have to do something more than just polish, you know? And she was like, oh, probably like 1,000 yen. And I was like, 1,000 yen? And she was like, well, I mean, that doesn't include the cleaning. And I was like, 1,000 yen is so cheap.
Yeah, it's like $7.50 or something.
Yeah. I was like, that's it? And she was like, well, you have insurance. So, and I was like, yeah, but that really covered almost everything. I was shocked. I was like, all right, yeah, let's replace it. Let's get all my dental work done in Japan.
Wow.
Before I go back.
Replace all my teeth.
Yeah. And so for context, I guess, in America, when we went to go get our teeth cleaned, and it wasn't an exorbitant doctor or anything, it was a nice average dentist. I think it was $100 to $150 each for cleaning, $150, which, I mean, that's like 2 man yen, in 200,000 is what 2 man is.
20,000.
Sorry, 20,000.
Annie has a little bit of difficulty with the numbers sometimes.
I know what a man is.
I'll ask her how much something cost, and she'll be like, it was only like 300,000 yen.
I'll just add a 0 on things.
And I'm like, what?
In my head, I know what I'm trying to say. It doesn't really help. But yeah, so ridiculously more affordable than when we were in America. In America, we also had health insurance, but it didn't cover the dentist. Like, you could have paid extra to have dental coverage, but it was one of those things where if you paid extra, you might as well just pay out of pocket for the dentist, which is what we did.
Unless you have like a serious issue or you're going super frequently.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, so for those that aren't Americans that listen to our podcast, often you don't have dental and vision. Like, those are add-ons that you do separately. So you have your health insurance, and then you can add on a dental policy, and then you can add on a vision policy.
Mm-hmm.
And because we went like once a year, and it was just really for cleaning, although we did get our wisdom teeth taken out, which was really expensive.
It was like a $5,000 issue.
It was a lot. But aside from that, yeah, usually it makes more sense just to pay for the cleaning out of pocket and then not pay a monthly fee.
Yeah, so here in Japan, it was like a very pleasant surprise.
Yeah, because here in Japan, our total was 7,700 yen.
Yeah.
Which was...
It's like $60.
Yeah, like $60 for both of us, yeah.
And a filling cap.
Yeah, you were expensive.
No, I wasn't even, though. I think it was like you were like 3,000 and I was like 4,000, 4,500. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I was like, this is great.
Yeah.
They were like, okay, raise your hand if it starts to hurt. And I was like, okay, deep breaths. And I was like, okay, I can't really feel it. And I was like, all right, this is okay. Like, I'm doing fine. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, I can feel it. And I was like, please stop. And she was like, okay, sorry. And then they drilled kind of a different spot. And then they like touched my tooth again. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can feel it. And she was like, okay, sorry, now we're done. And I was like, okay.
Mm.
So that's all it was like 2 seconds of like I don't know, like when you bite down on something and it hurts, or like a sharp pain kind of thing.
Yeah, thankfully tooth pain for me is typically like in a cleaning. It's always kind of like sharp, but then it goes away really fast.
Well, they were drilling.
So all you have to do is endure it.
Okay.
Just gotta be brave, you know?
I was very brave. Only one of us in this room had a drill in our teeth.
Because some of us just have nice
just
teeth.
Perfect teeth.
You know?
It's hard being this perfect.
It's difficult. The big thing, though, was how friendly everyone was.
They were very friendly.
Because, I mean, even though, like, it's one of those things where even if you've been studying Japanese and you speak a pretty good amount of Japanese, when you're, like, slapped on a, like, chair and they're, like, bending you around and, like, it's
open
like,
your mouth.
Yeah, it's like, it kind of...
Suddenly, you forget everything.
Because even at one point, she was just telling me to turn my head to the right, and I was just like, oh.
What's going on?
Yeah, and all she wanted me to do was, like, tilt my head a little. When I finally did it, she was like, oh.
Good job.
Like, yeah, like...
Your Japanese is so good.
Yeah, it's one of those funny things. It's just a new setting, and then sometimes they would use, some dentist terminology that I was like, I have no idea what
But they
you're
would
saying.
Google Translate, and then for things like gum disease, they'd use Google Translate, and I was like, oh, okay.
Or it was funny, they also had some, like, phrases pre-written that they showed us. They, like, brought out a little sheet of paper, and they were like, what do you think about this?
They had prepared. It was very kind.
Yeah, they were
I'm sure
super friendly.
It was kind of an annoyance for their workday, They have to, like, spend so much extra time on these random foreigners that don't understand how to say toothbrush.
Yeah. Sometimes the lady that I was with, though, occasionally she would bust out, like, a funny English... I can't remember a good example. But she would use an English word that was, like, a pretty technical word, but that would be, like, the only English word she knew. And I was kind of like...
Interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe they learn English medical terms.
Maybe. It could have just been, like, kind of like katakana English. Yeah. But yeah, it was super friendly that they made the effort to accommodate us when... You just hear so many stories about how, like, a lot of businesses are, like, well, you need to bring someone with you that speaks Japanese because we don't want to deal with it. And so they were super friendly.
Japanese friend called to make the initial appointment, which probably helped, especially because they, like, kind of warned them that some dumb foreigners were coming.
And we eat a lot of cake on Tuesdays, so her teeth.
One of them has a cavity.
Yeah.
I didn't know, but... overall it was a good experience. I think I can recommend the dentist in Japan without fear. So
at least that one.
Yeah.
If you need a dentist, come to Uchinada and we'll introduce you.
If you've had a dental experience in another country, let me know how it went. It's kind of scary to go to a doctor in a country that you're not, totally comfortable in.
Well, yeah, because there's a lot of differences. But now
onto a fun topic.
Part of the podcast where I don't think this guy goes to the dentist. He probably doesn't need to.
Oh.
Do you think he goes to the dentist?
Who are we talking about?
Godzilla.
Oh. Who else would we be talking about?
Duh.
Well, we just transitioned right into the next part of our discussion. It wasn't really part of Zeb's birthday, but I guess it's kind of an early birthday thing. We went to...
I guess a little bit. It was just another fun thing for me that... Like, we got to see a Ghibli film premiere in theaters, and then growing up, I was a big fan of Godzilla. I mean, I think big dinosaur-like creatures are really cool. So I was a big fan, and it was just another nice like opportunity that there just happened to be the new Godzilla film in theaters in Japan.
So we went to go see it.
Well, that's like a neat experience. So yeah, it's Godzilla Minus One, and it is in theaters in the United States right now. I think it came out like December 1st or December 3rd or something like that.
The minus one part is like, I guess the name is because it takes place during the last bit of World War II and then a couple years immediately following. So they were saying that Japan was trying to rebuild from the war, so it was already at 0, and then the destruction of Godzilla made it -1.
Oh, that's kind of funny.
That's what that was, because I was like, what is the -1 part of Godzilla -1?
I just thought it was like a funny like naming metric, because there are a lot of other Japanese films that are like something 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 like +1.
Oh, really?
And yeah, there are like a lot of films that they add like a 1 to it. I don't know why, but it's like, especially when they do reboots, they'll add like a 1.
I get 2 because it's like you had the first and then you have the sequel. But yeah, that's what I was reading the -1 was about. But
Could
in
be.
Japanese, Godzilla is Gojira.
Yeah, so, and I've mentioned this before, but if you're talking about Godzilla to a Japanese person in Japan, they probably won't know what you're talking about.
Well, Gojira and Godzilla don't really sound that similar in my mind. I guess because there's like the G, Gojira, which doesn't really seem like a katakana equal to Godzilla.
Yeah, well, do you know why he's called
Tell me.
Gojira? So this is funny, I didn't know this. So it's a combination of the Japanese katakana word gorira,
Like gorilla.
which is gorilla, and kujira, which is whale. So he's
Big old gorilla whale.
a gorilla whale. And they got that name because there was a member of the crew of the original film, and that was his nickname.
Really?
They call his nickname was Gojira.
Gorilla whale? He must have been big.
He must have been a big boy. And so he was like in the filming, and I guess when they were trying to think about like, what do we call this beast? They're like, oh, let's call him Gojira.
So Godzilla, the English title, didn't come first?
No.
Oh.
It's a Japanese film.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I don't know most things, but...
So Annie and I had this discussion like a little bit on the way back, and then I told her that we needed to save it for the podcast.
To talk about it with the listener.
Yeah. So Godzilla made his debut in 1954, and since then he's been in 33 Japanese films and 5 American films, and he's often called the King of Monsters. So what is Godzilla? And this is we're gonna get some bonus words of the week. We already have Gorira, we have Kujira, and now you get Kaiju. And a kaiju is a strange beast, and that's like the literal translation.
It's like a category of mythical animals.
Kind of. So that's what Godzilla is. He is a kaiju, and he's the king of the monsters, so he's kind of the king of the kaiju. And other kaiju include things like King Kong. And there are other kaiju out there. You could even include maybe some of the ones like from some of the original like Power Rangers movies. Of course, the enemies that Godzilla fights in his movies are also kaiju. Yeah, and they're really kind of like, I think they have to be huge, like this massive thing. But yeah, that's what he is.
I'm surprised that like the name from gorilla and whale doesn't have anything to do with lizards, because in my head he's pretty lizard-like.
Well, yeah, he's like a lizard.
Yeah, but apparently he's a gorilla whale.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that's like what the crew member was, and so I don't think they're saying
it's just
that.
a name.
Yeah, they're not saying he's a gorilla whale.
Oh yeah.
And he was like, I don't see the gorilla
I
resemblance.
don't really see it.
But
he's also a metaphor.
Yeah, so why is he? We know what he is, but why is he out there? There are a couple like ideas about Godzilla, and almost always he's a metaphor for nuclear bombing. So when Japan was nuked, he's also been said to be a metaphor for the 1954 Lucky Dragon 5 incident.
Am I supposed to know what that is?
No, and I didn't know what it is, so I had to look it up. So the Lucky Dragon 5 was a Japanese fishing vessel that was in or adjacent to the danger zone of a U.S. bomb test in Bikini Atoll. And so the ship and crew, they were covered in this like radioactive ash. So they suffered from acute radiation poisoning, and all but one of them survived. And apparently, like, survivors of nuclear fallout are very stigmatized in Japanese society.
Oh.
So when the ship made it back, people kind of didn't want to have anything to do with them, because there were these like survivors of nuclear fallout. So to some extent they were like shunned, but they received medical care, and they all lived except for the one. And I think they eventually did get paid by the U.S. government. There are like a few things. So apparently in the year before this happened, in October, the United States government had like, you know, sent out this like international memo letting everyone know that this bombing was going to take place. And apparently a lot of people just like ignored it. Like they wouldn't really pay attention to the danger zone. And so the ships would enter the area anyway. Because I was reading that apparently there were something like 100 other ships that were also within this danger zone.
Maybe it wasn't publicized well.
Well, they would publicize it, and then they would fly airplanes around the danger zone before, and they would also use radar to try and make sure no one was there. And apparently there was no sighting of this ship. But that happened. It's like a little historical event. And so sometimes people attach some of Godzilla, because Godzilla came out the same year that this happened.
Oh.
So some people say that kind of like pushed
I mean, that's
the crew.
Still nuclear.
Well, yeah.
So
that is still nuclear.
Well, I just mean, it just supports the idea you were saying that he's based on nuclear warfare.
Yeah, and then another strong idea is that he's a metaphor for the awakening of the United States and the vengeance it brought on Japan after the Pearl Harbor attack. So that's like another pretty strong idea, because coincidentally, Godzilla pretty much always only wrecks Japan. So a lot of people, I think, point to that as a metaphor for the United States.
I haven't seen like any of the other Godzilla movies. Is it always Japan?
Basically, except for some of the American films, he goes to like New York.
Oh, okay.
But in all the Japanese films, it's almost always he comes to Japan and destroys. So this is an aside, but he is, you know, in Shinjuku, you can see the giant Godzilla head. So he's like a mascot for Shinjuku. And the reason is because Shinjuku has been destroyed the most times in Godzilla films.
Oh.
So if you look at Godzilla films, apparently in like 3 of them, Shinjuku gets like totally leveled.
Poor Shinjuku.
So Shinjuku was like, well, he really likes us. So that's why Godzilla is in Shinjuku.
I thought it was King Kong.
No, it's a giant Godzilla head. It's at the top of the building. And he's like, I don't watch movies or pay attention to pop culture.
They already know.
So that's all about that. And so we know kind of what he is, and we know why he is. And another what. So he's a prehistoric reptilian monster that's been awakened and empowered by nuclear radiation. So yeah, he's just this kind of like fascinating creature that kind of has a lot wrapped into like the idea of Godzilla. And he's been around for over 50 years now. And so you might wonder, why does he always destroy Japan aside from metaphors? So he's been compared to, like, and I mentioned this before too, the Shinto god of destruction. And so it lacks moral agency and cannot be held to human standards of good and evil. He totally destroys everything, and then there's a rebirth, and something new and fresh can begin. So he's kind of like, it's not evil intent, like he doesn't really mean any like bad will, or
it's
like
not personal.
Yeah, it's not personal. He just kind of hates people.
I guess so.
And
seems pretty evil though.
Well, they claim that he just doesn't like humanity, but he's also known for fighting alongside humans against common enemies, other kaiju. So a lot of the premises in other Godzilla films is like some other monster appears, but Godzilla also happens to appear, and Godzilla will like beat up the other monster, and then they both kind of leave. So it's kind of like without Godzilla's interference, the other monster probably would have just totally wiped out everything. But because Godzilla came out, like only a little bit gets destroyed. So,
well, I liked the movie because we were not going to spoil anything, but I liked that it was more than just like destruction. It was more than just nonstop action. Like, you know, there was a plot and some human characters that you
what were you expecting?
Felt connected to. I don't know, just kind of the action adventure, like oh, people are killed. Oh, the monster is killed. Okay, the end. I don't know. I had very low hopes because I just thought it was going to be kind of like a thrilling, exciting action movie that was moderately entertaining, but it was more emotional than I expected, I guess. Like, it was more, I was like, oh, I feel connected to the characters. And it surprised me in more ways. Like, they were happy and sad things. Yeah, I liked it. I will say that...
I'm surprised. I thought it was going to be a movie that you weren't a fan of.
Oh. I mean, it wasn't my top favorite movie, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But I did think that Japanese actors are more dramatic in their facial expressions than Hollywood actors.
Yeah, they're much more expressive. It almost feels like you're watching a film. It almost seems like they're acting in a way that the film doesn't have, like, audio or something. It's almost like they're acting in a way so, yeah, you can see what their intent is and what they're saying is without hearing them or something.
Which was great because our Japanese skills are not that great. But because they were so expressive and, like, it wasn't cheesy, but it was, like, almost over the top in some things.
Yeah. There were some moments where I was like, oh, that was a little...
It was so earnestly over the top that it was like, okay, you know? But I could understand what was going on because there was so much facial expression context and so much dramatic, like, charades almost, like acting out with your body and less with your words. Like, sometimes in movies that I've seen with Hollywood, people will just be, like, sitting in a room and they'll be so stoic and... you wouldn't know what's going on unless you can understand that it's dialogue because they're just sitting there.
That's true. I guess that's a good way. I was trying to think of what the word is. And I guess, yeah, a lot of Hollywood is a little more stoic where the Japanese films
I'm James Bond. I don't show any emotion.
Yeah. And the Japanese film is weird because it's like no emotion but emotion. Like sometimes you can tell the cool characters, they were kind of like trying to downplay the emotion, but then it was still there, you know? Like some of the military men, it was like 1 second they would be like kind of stoic, but then they would be like, ah. It was just really interesting.
I liked it though.
Yeah, I thought it was good. And it was also really interesting to compare it to some of the other Godzilla films I've seen. This is another aside, but the first one I've ever saw was Godzilla versus Ghidorah, and he's a smog monster.
A smog monster?
Yeah, so
that sounds like cute. Like just a little cloud boy. In English, it was Godzilla versus the Smog Monster. That's the first Godzilla film I ever saw. And it made me wonder because I guess I never really thought about it, but that one's a really strong environmental message. So it's an alien life form, and it feeds off Earth's pollution. Oh. And there's a giant oil spill, and it like eats up all the oil, and it becomes this like giant smog monster. And so Godzilla has to fight the smog monster. Wow. Yeah. How many Godzilla movies do you think you've seen? Honestly, probably not that many. So I've seen like 3 of the U.S. ones, which my favorite was Godzilla 2000. Oh. It's a really strong childhood memory. And then I don't know, probably like 10 of the originals. So I mean, that's a lot. Well, there are more that I haven't seen than I have seen. Really? Well, yeah. If there are 33 Japanese Godzilla films. There are 33? Yeah, I said that at the very beginning. Sorry. Wow. Yeah, so there are 33 original, like, Japanese Godzilla films, and there are 5 American Godzilla films. That's just so many Godzilla films. That makes it even more impressive that they could make another movie. It's been around since the 50s. So this one was supposed to be a bit of, like, a reboot of the franchise. Like, the director really wanted to go back to, like, the roots of Godzilla and kind of... And that's kind of why, in one of the scenes, it actually is almost like a juvenile Godzilla towards the beginning. Oh, really? I don't remember that. You don't remember, like, the very first time you see him, he's really small? Oh. I mean, remember, he was, like, much smaller. He was, like, T-Rex sized. Yeah, I never... And the next time you see him, he's, like, warship sized. Oh, yeah. I didn't think about the scale difference. Yeah. It's because he was growing up. Oh. Well, then they showed the scenes with the nuclear testing, and then he got bigger. Oh, because he fed off of the nuclear... Yeah, the radiation. I see. Yeah. Anyway. Oh. I'm just now getting all these things. But you were telling me about a movie that you watched when you were a kid that wasn't Godzilla, but was very similar. Yeah, so I just thought it was funny that there was this other movie I used to see, and I always thought it was a Godzilla spinoff, like a Godzilla with Superman crossover. And that one, if anyone's ever seen it, it's called The Arctic Giant.
And it's basically a giant lizard that's frozen in a giant ice cube. And then it melts when it's in this kind of like museum in a city. And it starts like rampaging and destroying the city. And Superman has to come in and save the day. But it's like a very Godzilla-esque creature.
Did he come out before Godzilla?
Came out in 1942.
Well,
so 12 years before Godzilla.
Maybe Godzilla's based on that guy.
I don't think anyone would ever say that, though, because that would be maybe like disrespectful to the idea of what Godzilla is.
Yeah.
But certainly they probably would have seen it and maybe got some influence from it, but I don't know. But yeah. And then there's some other like interesting Godzilla tidbits, like because he is such a cultural icon. There's a lot of interesting stuff about him, like the Godzilla versus Space Godzilla, which is a really good one.
Space Godzilla?
Yeah, Space Godzilla is really cool. That coincided with the Kobe earthquake, and it's an earthquake that caused a lot of deaths via fire because it happened in the winter. And they actually were so worried that people wouldn't go see the movie, they lowered the cost of tickets.
Wow.
Because they thought, it's going to be too stigmatized. No one's going to want to see Godzilla destroy a city.
Yeah.
When a city just got destroyed.
It's a rough time.
Yeah,
I wonder if that worked, and if people went to go see it.
I don't know. I can't remember what the Wikipedia said. Yeah, it's just like a really interesting, I don't know, it was really fun seeing a Godzilla film in the home of Godzilla.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just neat. I'm glad you liked it, because I didn't know if you would like it or not.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe it was because I didn't have any expectations, but yeah, I think it was good. I would watch it again in English to make sure I got everything.
Yeah, I was trying to think about that. I wonder I'm assuming the English movie, they dubbed it.
Oh, you think so?
They had to. I don't think they just slapped subtitles on it and then released it in America.
I figured they would just do subtitles. I don't
think people would have gone to see it because it was like a huge hit in the U.S. and I don't think a subtitled movie would have been a huge hit in the U.S.
Maybe.
But then I was trying to think about this too. That's probably why dubbed films in America look so bad. Because the Japanese actors are so expressive with their faces. If you then dub it, it's really hard to match that energy and that facial
it's
expression.
Really impressive to dub movies because you have to shorten the translation to fit the time that the original language took to say that phrase. And it doesn't always, sometimes it will be just a word that you need a whole phrase for in another language.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see the dubbed one now that we've seen the Japanese one. But of course, I don't think we'll get the dubbed one released.
Yeah, they're not going to do that in Japan.
Maybe we can find it online somewhere.
Someone can tell us if they see it.
It's a fun experience. If you've seen Godzilla, let us know your thoughts on
Godzilla Minus One.
Yeah, whether you liked it or not.
Yeah.
Less destructive.
Yeah. Not destructive at all. But we got to ride bikes with the high school cycling team with Zeb's Uchinata high school guys. And there was one girl. And that was cool. And
this was a really funny thing because, of course, we like cycling. And I'd been reading online. And there's a cycling magazine I really like. And I happened to be on LinkedIn. And I went to the editor. His name's Edward Pickering. And I went to his LinkedIn page, and I noticed on his LinkedIn that he listed being a jet, ALT. And I was like, well, that's pretty neat.
Yeah, that's already a small world that another cyclist that you admire.
Yeah, and then I looked, and he was in Komatsu.
Which is an hour away
right
from
next
here.
to us. And this was in the the late 90s to early 2000.
Just such a small world. Out of all the places, first of all, the fact that he even was a jet, and then the fact that he was in this prefecture an hour away.
Yeah.
In a region where the jets, for probably an hour radius, hang out together.
And it's actually really interesting because I would like to hear from him what it was like back then. Because I'm sure a lot's changed. Because that predates the Shinkansen by 15 years. And just a lot of other stuff. It probably felt much more rural.
Internet was just coming out.
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
You didn't have a smartphone with internet on it.
I can't imagine moving to a foreign country like this without... I use Google Translate so much and Google Maps.
I wonder if he went to the dentist in those 3 years.
He did say it was 3 of the most formative years of his life.
Yeah, he met his wife while he was here. So I ended up messaging him on Instagram because I was like, well, that's such a small world. I just want to message this guy.
Yeah.
And one, I think it's funny that now the magazine that he edits, like I subscribe to it, and so it comes back to Ishikawa. So it's kind of like a little full circle thing. So I messaged him, and he actually told me that he's still friends with the Uchinada ALT from that same time period, and they passed along a photo of the Uchinada cycling team. And I was kind of lamenting the fact that the cycling team really doesn't do any like road riding, because last year the coach told me they're really just focused on track, and he told me the road riding was like a little too dangerous and it's not something they really do.
And they're really competitive with track, so they might as well, I guess in their mind,
like two of them are really competitive with track.
Yeah, but they're very competitive. Like they're nationally competitive.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to keep doing the discipline that you're focused on, I guess.
Yeah, but it's kind of goofy.
Not as fun.
Yeah, not for us. Me. Yeah. And then also, just I can't really get involved with that because they already have such a good thing going. So it's like interesting that there's like a strong cycling team at the school that I teach at, but historically I haven't done anything with them. One, I don't know anything about the track, and it's not really my place to go in there and like insert myself in something that's already going super well. So I was just kind of letting it go. And like if an opportunity came up, I have ridden with the team once or twice before this. But if an opportunity came up, I said yes. And so it just so happened that I was actually standing in the bathroom, and the coach came in and he was using the bathroom next to me. And then as we're standing there, he's like, "Oh, do you want to ride with the team this afternoon?" And I was like, sure. And he just kind of came in and said that, yeah, we're actually going to start some road training. And this was literally like a day or two after I'd just told old Ed that we didn't really do that. And so then I got asked to do it. So it was like a little serendipity, but it was really nice. And so I joined him for an hour and a half of road training, and it went well. And then kind of maybe through some miscommunication, I got signed up to do 4 hours with them on Saturday. And thankfully Annie came.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting experience. But I
don't know that it was miscommunication. I mean, he was like, well, let's ride again. And you were saying, well, I'm going to train for 4 hours on Saturday. And
well, we were talking about the weather.
Oh.
And he was like, yeah, the weather might be pretty bad like the rest of the year, so I don't know if we'll get out much. And I was like, well, the weather on Saturday looks nice. And I was saying that I'm looking forward to going for a ride on Saturday. And he was like, oh, we should do that. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, but it was nice that we had the opportunity to do it. The only thing is that, I guess, to keep it safer and more kind of contained, and it's just a high school group, they do like to ride on circuits, like a small loop.
I guess that's what they like. That's
what
we did.
That's what they've done both times.
Yeah, I don't know if there was ever a different option presented. Like, I don't know if it was ever like, hey, I know this great route.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder what they would do if I went to him and I was like, hey, I know this route that I often use.
Yeah.
It takes about 2 hours. Like, could we do that?
Yeah.
He might be like,
Well, it was interesting because one of the parents followed us with a car, so there was always like vehicle support, which was nice. I don't think it was needed, but it was just nice because also if anybody got dropped off the back, they could either just stop and be caught again on the next lap, or like, I don't know, ride at their own pace, but not really be away from the group that much. Because the lap, it only took us 20 minutes to do basically this circle in the lagoon, kind of a flat spot that's just off of Uchinada.
It's a good training course.
Yeah.
It's a bit much to do it for that long, but I was surprised at how fast it went. Yeah, it wasn't. I thought it was going to be much more boring than it was, but it was pretty fun.
They rode more than I ever rode as high schooler, when I was that age. And I was really impressed by the girl too, because it's hard to show up to something where you're the only girl, and there was a bunch of high school guys and then her. So I was like, oh, hi. And
also, I'm pretty sure she's from a different high school. Like, I don't think she goes to Uchinada. I think she came over specifically to do that ride.
Well, she was really strong. So we rode over to the lagoon thing, and then you were in the lead, kind of letting everybody draft off of you, which was really nice because I don't know what watts you were holding at the front, but I was sixth back, behind a bunch of the high school guys, and I was only doing 150 watts. It was pretty comfortable.
That's good.
Yeah. It was good for you too because you wanted to work out, I think. So it was nice that you were on the front for most of it, and probably the whole first hour and a half, you were just leading us on these laps. And then on one of the straight stretches, you kind of told everybody, why don't we start doing a rotating pace line, and then they can practice.
Yeah, because I just thought it must be so boring just to be.
Yeah, and they
like.
They might also not get that chance, because I remember when I didn't start with road riding when I was getting into cycling, so college was the first time I was really with people who were doing organized road riding, and people were like, oh, we're going to do a pace line, and I was like, I have no idea what you're telling me right now.
Yeah. I think that there are so many interesting little things like that would be worthwhile to practice, but it's just difficult because I'm not like a coach. I'm not a professional in any means like that, but I do have like a lot of experience within the world of cycling.
And we've coached youth cycling before. So
yeah, but it's just like different.
On the road team.
Yeah, there's just so many things like, okay, like now everyone, you should practice like getting your water bottle out and like taking a drink and then putting it back.
Like while riding.
Yeah, or you should practice this I don't know. It's a lot, but yeah, it was it was a nice experience. Like I'm glad that I got to do it, and now it is funny, like I do have a bit of a better relationship with those students, and pretty much all of them were first-year students. So I think this is what happened, is that a lot of first-year students came to the school, and I think that they are more interested in road riding than track. And so I think they have maybe pushed to do more road riding, and then that's why they've started the road training.
But it was so goofy, too, because it was just a bunch of high school kids, in all the ways that you would think of. Like, they were a little aloof, like they were eager to go out and ride, but they were kind of like, oh, I forgot to eat breakfast this morning, and I was like,
one of them overslept and showed up just a little bit late.
Yeah, and it was like they were like excited and ready to go and strong, but they were kind of like, it was like, we're about to ride for 4 hours, like, what do you mean you only brought a granola bar? And so
yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, it's like there's some like nutritional stuff that in the future would be like really good for them to know.
It's hard because neither of us were coaches. We were just kind of riding, but I did feel bad that they were not prepared and that I didn't know how to help them be prepared, with food especially. They were getting super tired at the end, and I was like, of course you're exhausted. Like, you don't have any calories.
Yeah, it was like 6 laps in, and people were like holding it together pretty well, but it was kind of right at around the 6-lap mark where people kind of just started like blowing up.
It was funny because they were also being kind of high school boys and being kind of competitive, like in a fun way. But when we would take turns pulling at the front, and some of them, I don't know if, I didn't really know what the point of our like pulling at the front was, so I didn't really say either way. But if you're working together, you kind of want to do the same speed, the same power, and not just like attack each other. But what they were doing, instead of keeping a steady, consistent effort, someone would like peel off, and the next person would just like go really hard, like 100 watts harder than the person before, and then everybody in the back, is like, oh dang, so they gotta like kick it into gear. And they were continually like attacking on each other, basically. Maybe not realizing it.
They're not really riding with any metrics. So like I mostly ride with power, and I also enjoy like looking at heart rate, but I think in a lot of the times they're like riding solely based on speed,
well,
which isn't bad, but then sometimes it's really funny because if you're riding just on speed, at some portions when there's not a headwind, we'd be going like super easy, like barely pedaling.
Yeah.
And maybe in another instance where there's like a slight uphill or there is a headwind, all of a sudden we're like smashing it, and they're like riding as hard as they can. And
I think they were trying to go around like 23 miles per hour.
I think when I rode with them on Thursday, the goal seemed about 20 miles an hour, because we would ride at about 20 miles an hour, and sometimes it'd be like a little bit harder, and then sometimes it was just so easy that I was like, what are we doing out here?
Yeah, because I do remember that, because when we had a tailwind, the guy who was pulling was going pretty chill, and I was like, oh, maybe he's really tired. And I looked down, and we were going like 23 miles per hour, and I was like, oh, he's just looking at his speed, which was fine.
That's all he has. So there are a lot of interesting things like that like I could talk to them about, but of course there's a language barrier, and then there's like a goal barrier. I don't even know what they're like. Are they trying to race, or are they just like a group of dudes that are trying to have fun? Some of them seem like they want to be fairly competitive.
Yeah, when we were going back, like after we were probably 3.5 hours, 70 miles in, and everybody was pretty blasted because they hadn't eaten, and we were going back, and one of the guys attacked on you at the end, and that was kind of like nice to see, because I knew he was tired, but he at least was like, his spirit wasn't broken, like, because you had attacked us on
I didn't even attack.
Okay, well, whatever you call it, but you had accelerated.
I just like gradually increased my pace a little bit more and more and more.
Well, you dropped all of us off the back.
Well, I mean, yeah.
Well, yeah, obviously. But it was interesting because the two guys that I was with, we hung on until the rest of the group was off, because I think those two guys were a little stronger. And then you could kind of start to see the cracks coming, and one guy popped off the back, and then it was just me and this one high schooler, and I was getting pretty tired, and I was like, okay, if Zeb keeps steadily going, which I knew you were, because you weren't even anywhere close to your
And also,
like,
I could
max effort.
I could see that kid's shadow.
Yeah.
And I could see his head start to really bob. So I was like, oh yeah, he's about to.
Well, the gap opened up slightly, and I was behind him, and he couldn't close it, and so I was like, okay, I'll try to go around and close it, and I couldn't close it, and then we both just kind of were laughing.
That's funny.
Yeah, but after that, he did try to attack on the way back, so I was like, okay, he's still having fun.
Yeah, it was fun because, I mean, sometimes I think it's nice to have a bit of racing element, just I don't know, just for fun. Sometimes it just spices things up a little instead of just putzing around. Also, at the very end, I think it's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I had to keep remembering that they were just high schoolers. Maybe they don't want to know how to be faster or put any metric training.
Yeah, I think some of them are there just to have fun, which is okay. So, yeah. Well, I think we'll have to skip the Kit Kats and go straight into the words of the week.
Oh, okay. We talked a lot. What's your word of the week?
So mine is mochiron.
Oh, that's really close to what mine is, kind of.
Oh, really?
Mochiron is certainly, right?
Yeah, it means of course.
Yeah.
So when the teacher was asking me about, are you going to be there? Or how's it going to go? I was of course I'll be there. I didn't want to tell him
I used that
maybe.
word this week, actually, because my friend was like, oh, how was Godzilla? Did you get popcorn? And I was like, mochiron. Of course I got popcorn. Why wouldn't I?
And oolong tea. We forgot to mention that.
Oh, yeah.
It was a bit of a weird one in the movie theater.
Tea was an option.
It was nice.
Refreshing.
Yeah. What's your word?
My word is tashikani, which is exactly or certainly. You can kind of use it as, oh, definitely. The same way that you would, if somebody is like, oh, I think we should do that, and you can be like, oh, definitely we should.
Yeah.
Or certainly. So, I only know tashikani because I was with a group of people, and this one girl kept using it. It was kind of her
her
phrase.
thing.
Yeah, and I was like, I don't know what that is, but it must be really useful because she can use it in all these situations.
Swiss Army knife of words.
Yeah, tashikani.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of this episode, then.
Thanks for listening to all our cycling and Godzilla rambling.
Yeah, hopefully you like Godzilla and dentists and bikes.
The dentist. Yeah, if you have any questions or want to share some of your own stories, ramblingramsbothams@gmail.com. We're always, inboxes are always open.
Yeah, and you can find us on Instagram at Rambling Ramsbothams.
Yep, thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.